Good morning and welcome to Ask the Expert. My name is Alex Schlagman and I'm one of the founding partners of SaveTheHighStreet.org. And today we're going to be talking about the future of the high street. Ask the Expert is a daily series from 8:30 to 9 a.m. to help small businesses. You can ask any questions in the comments or use the hashtag QBATE, that's QBATE on Twitter. If you need any more advice, you can join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook, where accountants and business experts are on hand 24/7, or you can join SaveTheHighStreet.org if you have any questions about the high street that we do not get to today. During the live session, we'll be running a poll, so please do engage with it, and I'll be revealing the results at the end of this session. Okay, so without further ado, let's get talking about the high street. The next few months could prove to be the most important in the entire history of the high street. And as I'm sure everybody listening in and watching in today is aware, almost every week at the moment, news is emerging of another retail or restaurant chain closing outlets, or in some cases, closing their business down altogether. This is leaving yet more empty units to fill or repurpose into other uses. And it's begging the question, what will our high streets look like next month, let alone in the years to come? At SaveTheHighStreet.org, we passionately believe that small businesses are going to be central to the solution of fixing the high street, reimagining the high street for the future. We need to attract the next generation of high street entrepreneurs because BHS is not going to be replaced by Debenhams. Maplin's will not replace HMV. Bella Italia will not replace Carluccio's. And as such, these units that now currently are empty need to be filled with startups and local independents and growing brands. And a lot of our work at SaveTheHighStreet.org has been focused around how do we enable this future? So today I'm going to take you through a few of the key points, key things that we're looking at here, we're working on, and hopefully get you thinking about, some of the things that whether you're a small business and you'd like to get access to some space to sell from, or maybe you're involved in the high street in some way indirectly as a service provider or a landlord or a community champion, what role you could play in enabling this future high street too. Okay, so I'll talk about a few things here quickly, and obviously if you have any questions, post them in the comments and let's get talking about it, and more of a discussion later on. So firstly, we've been starting to open up lots of interesting data around over and under supply locally in particular high street areas. What we're looking for here are market opportunities on a local level. Where are there gaps in the market for a new type of high street business to emerge on a particular high street? So if there is a set of vacant units in a local shopping centre or on a local high street, what are the types of businesses that are required to meet the needs of that local community? Where are the gaps in that market? Is it that a vegan cafe is going to work here and a vape shop's going to work there? Are we short on Italian restaurants here and long on newsagents over there? So really starting to understand what's the local consumer demand for high street services and products in a particular catchment area, and what's the local supply? And as a result, what kind of businesses should we be looking to get into those vacant units? Secondly, working closely, particularly with landlords here, to start to work on new commercial relationships between landlord and tenant that work for everybody. Ultimately, we're no longer in this world of having 5-year plus upward only rent review long-term leases. We're moving to a world of much more flexible agreements between landlord and tenant. And a lot of the really interesting stuff is actually shifting away from the conventional lease into more of a license type structure, often giving the tenant the opportunity to take a decision between making a longer term commitment for a lower quarterly or monthly payment, or a slightly higher commitment in terms of payment for that period, but without the long-term commitment required. It's more like a pop-up shorter term situation for that particular business in that unit. Other really interesting things here have been going on, and we're really focused on enabling for the future, is more partnership between landlord and tenant in the commercials. So in shopping centres the last few years, a lot of the big tenants have been pushing onto the landlord the need to take a percentage of the rent that they pay linked to turnover. They call it turnover rents. And actually, this is starting to disseminate across the entire high street, where a lot of landlords are looking to recover some of the fact that they can't take the full rent by taking a proportion of the turnover. And a lot of our work here is about trying to get better analytics in this whole system. So not only can landlords see, what is the sales turnover, the performance of a particular business at a time, but also starting to get into what's the future performance look like for a small business in a particular unit at a particular time on a particular plan. So really starting to forecast what are the sales likely to look like for a business, and as a result, how do we build a commercial arrangement between landlord and tenant on the high street that reduces the risk for the tenant coming in, but gives the landlord the opportunity to take some of the upside if the business does very, very well. So really starting to build more of a partnership between the landlord and tenant rather than a sort of supplier relationship like it has been historically to date. A couple of the other things I think that are really important here is that, if we're going to move into a world where we get the right businesses in the right places, we've got a lot of gaps emerging. The vacancy rate is above 10% on high streets now in the UK, and it's growing. So we need to start to attract these businesses quickly. And what we're proposing is that we start to get business in on a short-term rent-free period, getting landlords to agree to the fact that you don't want to have an empty unit. It does not help the makeup of your high street or your shopping centre, and you have a rates liability bill as a result of it. So let's get businesses in on a short-term basis, rent-free. And in that period, let's give the business as much support as possible to give them the best chance of achieving their potential. So we've been introducing the concept of bringing our digital assistant product to joinjoe.com as part of this proposition for the landlord to offer their tenants for free so that they can give that tenant the best chance of succeeding in that period, while helping them understand what the potential of this business is in that unit at that time. Some of the really interesting things we're seeing emerge is that some of the bigger units, the big old department stores, are no longer going to be department stores, and we're starting to help them reimagine into what we're calling micro malls, indoor and outdoor markets full of micro units, carefully curated as the right mix of businesses and given the kind of agreement that's going to work for them, usually flexible rolling license agreements linked to turnover with the support, just as the things we've been talking about here. Lots of planning legislation changes as well, where the government is now starting to introduce something called a Class E. We can talk a bit more about that, as well as more permitted development rights to build inside of high streets. And ultimately, we need to start to get the right businesses in the right places, on the right agreements, doing the right things, and creating the conditions for businesses, particularly small businesses, to succeed on this high street of the future. Because ultimately, the success or failure of high streets, it impacts us all. And the actions taken over the coming months by businesses, councils, community champions, suppliers, landlords, government, and consumers are going to impact high streets long into the future. Okay. So we are getting to a point where I'm starting to see some questions coming through, which is good. So I have a quick look at the questions coming through. And as I said, do make sure you get your questions in using the hashtag we talked about earlier in the comments. Quick question here I've got from Jennifer from Facebook Messenger. Okay, so she says, "Hi Alex, I have an online shop and in the future I might be interested in trying out a pop-up store if there will be a short-term or flexible leases. What's your recommendation when it comes to choosing a location of a store?" Okay, thanks, Jennifer. It's a really good question. And this is going to be a big focus of ours. And anyone who's really thinking along the lines of Jennifer here, definitely worth reaching out to SaveTheHighStreet.org, because we're starting to support businesses before coming onto the high street exactly with this kind of challenge. So I think some of the key considerations, Jennifer, is try and get hold of some of the data. Either reach out to us or see whether you can get access to at least some insight yourself as to the areas that you think you might be willing to go and set up a pop-up in, What is the set of businesses that are already there in that local area? Get a view of what's the makeup of businesses, particularly ones that look a little bit like you. Secondly, start to get the data on the other side around what does the consumer demand side look like in this local area. We've been pulling together and building out a data set nationally of local consumer expenditure down to very micro level products, milk, very, very specific things to really understand, what do local consumers within a catchment area spend on different products and services. We've also been working with partners who track footfall into particular areas, so you can start to get a makeup of who's in these areas and how much footfall flow are you likely to get. Ultimately, what you need to get to here, though, Jennifer, is exactly what I was talking about earlier, which is that perfect intersect between supply and demand. What I'd suggest is, you pick a few different areas to think about, do an evaluation like this on all of those areas so you can understand where you think you've got some cut through. And like you said, if you can get yourself onto a short-term flexible lease type agreement where you can go and test new areas, you can go and try out an area that might work for you. Potentially, what you might find yourself doing is spending the next year or so jumping from area to area, trialing different areas while at the same time picking up new customers each time and learning more from how your business can service customers in a more omni-channel sense if you're an online shop only today. So hopefully that helps, Jennifer. But as I said, if there's any if you're really looking at this seriously, definitely worth dropping us a line at savethehighstreet.org. I've got a question here from Alfie, who's also from Facebook Messenger. So Alfie said, morning, Alex. What kind of high street establishments have you seen thriving now that lockdown measures are being eased? So a really good question. Probably worth just taking a step back about who's done well in these periods and who's really been challenged. There's different ways of looking at who's been thriving. So firstly, I'll look at the kind of things that businesses have been doing. So there's been a number of businesses that have been adapting really well to this period, a number of small businesses. And some of you who've been on the Ask the Expert series before and seen me in the past, remember probably be talking about the recovery and resilience campaign we were running with the big survey and the support we were doing, running this 12-week program, helping businesses adapt and in some cases pivot their business to be more relevant in this period. And through that exercise, and we were working really closely with some businesses and in a lighter touch way with over 1,000 more, we've started to realize that there's certain things that businesses are doing that are really getting cut through. One of the big things is a more general point, really. There's this new normal everyone's talking about around hygiene and distancing. And these are really important recommendations, obviously, to get in place. You need to make sure your customers feel safe and secure when they're coming into your store. And everything from having, sanitizer stations and, PPE equipment and making sure, plexiglass is set up in the right way professionally and these kind of things. There's a whole range of different recommendations. But the big thing that we're seeing that success stories is characterizing the success stories is that balance between making sure you make everyone feel safe and secure and it doesn't feel like an environment, that's unsafe from a virus spreading point of view, but still getting that great customer experience. And unfortunately, a lot of people have been too far down one side or the other. But the ones that seem to find their way in that middle, and they're doing clever things, like finding ways to still provide great customer service while their staff are wearing a mask. And, it's those key, that key intersect is one of the big things we've seen. There's clearly a lot of talk as well about new ways of selling. So a lot of businesses that have really thrived in this period moved quickly and are moving well and effectively around things like setting up local to local delivery, not just selling delivery anywhere in the world, but actually serving their local customers using couriers. It's something we've been working quite closely with a few of the courier networks around the UK to help local businesses get set up effectively to provide on-demand local delivery for their products to local consumers nearby, as well as a lot of businesses have seen big demand for online reservation and booking systems. And there's lots of different applications of that as well. It's not just what you might expect in sort of the food and bev restaurant type space. Actually, a lot of businesses, for example, fashion boutiques that are typically doing well, have created and well marketed the opportunity for their customers to come in and have booked reservations for particular times of the day, where they can come in and almost have a much more personalized concierge service. And we're seeing that work really well. Other side of things that, in terms of the types of businesses that are thriving, I think we've got a number of businesses have, that's the right word, developed offerings to best meet the needs of customers during this environment. And the reality is, because of everything that's been going on, our needs have been changing. And the obvious example are the people who've really taken advantage of the PPE boom. But actually, there's loads of other examples of high street businesses that have adapted their offering and made themselves almost like COVID relevant, and their branding more COVID centered, and have done really well out the back of that. Okay, I better move on. I've got Raj here from Twitter. As we've opened up our furniture shop again, we're planning to do some marketing to give us the best chance to get custom. I would like to know what your thoughts are between email marketing and using social media. Is one better than the other to draw a socially distanced crowd? Would love to hear your thoughts on both methods. Okay, so rather than make a sort of like-for-like comparison about email and social, I'll definitely say that they're two of the key channels that local businesses should be using, and in fact, through this whole period, were important to continue on. Email, from the perspective particularly, less of an acquisition channel for new customers and much more of a way to sort of keep your customers engaged around, through this period, what you've been doing to adapt, how you've personally been building a bit of personality into the brand, and keeping customers up to date. Email marketing, very, very effective for a number of businesses in our community. We're actually hosting a dedicated webinar on both email marketing and social media over the coming weeks, both of them in September. And I wouldn't say either of them are things that shouldn't be a consideration. But if you were coming into this period, a business that did not have any email data to date, your first priority is really about how do you start to collect email data and contact information in a GDPR compliant way. So making sure you have opt-in from that customer or visitor or somebody who's been to your website to actually engage with them around a newsletter type offering on an ongoing basis. You have to be really explicit with those opt-ins. So if you haven't already got that information, I think the first thing for you to do is to start to think about, how do I start to build an email contact database? Now, if you have got that information, it is really an important channel for you to start to, at the very least, keep your customers up to date about news and events that are going on within the store or within your restaurant or within your cafe or your offering, whatever it might be. Social media. So social media is important for all local businesses. Now, it depends on your business, your focus, your customer groups, as to how much focus you put into different social channels. And I think one of the big questions we often look at when we're first looking with a business around how to develop their social engagement and their results from social, what they can achieve from it, is to really start to understand what are the mix of social platforms that you could be on, and where are you spending your time? Where is your focus at the moment? So depending on what type of business you are, there's all kinds of social channels. And we've got businesses that are doing really well on TikTok, especially over the last few months. There's been a real opportunity there where there's been less kind of advertisers, less brands utilizing relative to the scale of the distribution that's been going up, particularly with younger audiences. But social media for all brands is important, but it just depends on where you put your effort. And I think from a perspective of choosing one rather than the other, My perspective would be, don't think so much like that. Let's get your business aligned to what you're trying to achieve here, and actually just see email as another one of those sort of core things that you need to do, whether you're in the process of building out that database or whether you're in the process of continually building your database as well as engaging your customers ongoing. And with social, as I said, ongoing piece, and we could talk for half an hour alone just on social media. Okay, so I've got a question. Just building on that, just look back at Raj's question here. So one is, which are the best at building a socially distanced crowd? The one thing I'd mention there that I didn't touch on is that if you can get not huge amounts of money together, but some of the targeting possibilities in social media from an advertising point of view will give you a great opportunity to go and test quite quickly at a few quid just as an initial test on a geo-targeted basis based on certain, if you like, audience segments. And you can build this. Let's say you have already been doing email marketing. You can plug your email marketing data into Facebook and set up a custom audience just to target your email list on Facebook with particular targeted messages. So I think when you're talking here, Raj, about drawing a socially distanced crowd, the advertising opportunities for you to do using some of the social channels could be really effective there as well. Okay. I've got Eden here from Facebook Messenger. Great listening to you, Alex. Thanks, Eden. Are there any useful online blogs or podcasts you can recommend for small businesses right now? Well, firstly, I mean, I'd say the guys here at QuickBooks doing a fantastic job with this Ask the Expert series. And every day there's new stuff coming out and new resources coming out from the guys at Intuit QuickBooks. Also ourselves as well. I mean, look at savethehighstreet.org. Our raison d'etre here is about helping small businesses succeed on the high street, and there's tons of educational content coming through. We're running 2 webinars a week at the moment around all different kinds of topics. So yeah, just make sure you just get yourself plugged in there. And if you've got some quite specific things you're looking for, Eden, if you want to drop us a line at info@savethehighstreet.org, someone in the team here will definitely pick that up and point you in the right direction of some kind of specific blogs or podcasts that might suit what you're looking for right now. I've got Patrick here from Instagram. Patrick saying, hi Alex, with your point about selling in new ways, I'm totally new to the online world with me owning a cafe. So where would you recommend I can get started as a beginner? So, I mean, from our point of view, we set something up over the last few months called the Recovery and Resilience Campaign for the High Street. And really good start point there is if you go onto the savethehighstreet.org site and you scroll down a little bit, you'll see a banner come up around getting a free report. In there, basically, you'll be able to fill in a survey, Patrick, that basically takes you through a lot of the key strategies that we've seen working for high street businesses across a number of themes, not just around selling in new ways, but also things around helping reduce your costs and adapt your marketing and access funding. But there's a big section in there about selling in new ways, and it goes through all kinds of stuff that businesses are doing today. Once you've completed that survey as well, you'll get a report which will give you some personalized recommendations around the key things that, as a result of your survey, we'd suggest you look at, with some educational content on there. So maybe that's a good place to start. It's all completely free. And again, if you've got any further questions around any of these things, just drop us a line at info@savethehighstreet.org or join the newsletter and drop us a line, respond to our newsletter around this kind of stuff. That's probably a good place to start. I've got a Michael here from Facebook Messenger. Hi Alex, we're looking at ways to reduce costs in our shop. What are your top tips for doing this without reducing staff? I haven't got very long, but I'm going to go through a few of these. So firstly, I think it's really important that you're having a sort of thorough review of all of the sort of the costs across your business, that you don't really have that much emotional attachment to in reality. Your costs for utilities bills, your costs for broadband, often you can make meaningful differences here. And we've been partnering with um, a few people in the industry who've been sort of helping us broker and get off-market deals for lots of businesses. And I remember one business in the network saved thousands and thousands of pounds just on their utilities bills. I mean, it surprised me. So there's a lot to be doing just to look at all of those more boring costs. That's the start bit. Secondly, I think you need to be at least in conversation with your landlord about your situation today and what's going to work for you moving forward. The reality is, there are businesses in our community who are saving a lot of money by having, conversations and negotiations with their landlords. We're offering free consultation calls with landlord negotiators actually every Friday for businesses that are on the Join Joe program, as well as businesses that have filled in the survey that I'd mentioned before. That's been running for a few months now, so definitely worth checking that out. I think we've got time for one more question. Michael, I appreciate there was just a couple of tips there, but again, I'll reiterate it. If there's anything else anybody wants to talk about that I haven't been able to cover in enough detail today, please do drop us a line at savethehighstreet.org. And if you mention you on the Ask the Expert, I'll make sure I take a look at it myself as well. But there are a couple of tips for you, Michael. Okay, I've got Kayla here from Twitter DM. What opportunity do you feel lies ahead with high street shops and small businesses? Well, firstly, I think there are tons of opportunity, Kayla, in a world where lots of the bigger chains, the bigger national chains are retracting from the high street, and there is a much stronger negotiating position than you ever had before with landlords. There's an environment of more support for high street businesses from local and central government than we've ever seen. So you've got an opportunity right now where there are going to be local areas full of communities where people want to spend their time and money locally, particularly as we start to edge out of this period. And there's going to be some big winners. Now, one thing that we're really looking at here is, as I said earlier, look at where are these gaps in the market emerging? Because we've got a situation where high streets weren't particularly well planned in the past. Businesses just arrived on a high street, they got into a 5-year lease, and it wasn't a very flexible agreement, so they stayed there for a long time. Now we're in a position where the next generation of entrepreneurs are going to be coming onto the high street, and this is your opportunity to make sure you're in the right place at the right time, offering the right thing on a really attractive agreement for yourself. So I think there's going to be lots of opportunities for small, independent businesses selling in town centre shopping centres and on vibrant high streets that weren't even available before this lockdown period. And in an environment where a lot of the market might have been dominated by national chains locally, and they're just not there. Okay. One second. I've got a quick reaction to the poll results here. So the poll results are in. So what do you think the future of the high street might look like? Well, I think you might already have a view of my perspective on some of this. That I believe that the high street is going to be made up mainly of local independents. It sounds like the people listening in don't agree. So the question was, what do you think the future of the high street will look like? We've had 33% clicked on, made up mainly of national chains. We've had 0 clicked on, made up mainly of local independents, although I'm going to put my click there, although I had no hands while I was busy doing this to do that. And I'll just put one little bit of context there, is that at the moment, 55% of the high street is independent and 45% are larger chains, and that number is growing quickly. In terms of strength on independence. Then we have 33% clicked on a mix of national chains and local independents. And we've actually had 33% clicked on there will be no high streets. And I'd like you all to consider when we leave this call, what does that world look like? A world of boarded up ghost towns where we live in our homes behind our screens. We don't interact in the real world. We're not just talking about product retail here. We're talking about not going out and spending some time with your local community in any sense. Having a local spa or a yoga studio or a restaurant or a bar or any type of business locally. What kind of future is that? I know from my point of view, that's not a future I'm willing to accept and a future I'm willing to make an impact on working towards. And the reality is we can all impact the future of the high street. And the more of us that do play a role, the stronger we'll all become. Thank you very much.